While every game is different, speedrunning has a pretty straightforward approach. Runners attempt to finish their objective as quickly as possible. Oftentimes, this involves unique routing, impressive glitches, and mastery of movement. There are other instances though where things are just a bit different. Whether the objective seems odd, the methods are unusual, or the routing is just plain absurd, speedrunning can get a little weird. But in the pursuit of perfection, maybe some speedruns go too far? Although speedrunning typically has an anything goes mentality, there's almost always a line. Most communities take a hard stance against console modification or hardware manipulation. Scratching discs or cooking consoles is looked down upon and usually banned. Usually being the key word though. Some communities are more liberal in their allowings. Tales of the Abyss is an action RPG released on the PS2. While most categories in this game are fairly standard speedruns, there is one that pushes the boundaries further than most communities will go. Open tray glitch is largely what the name suggests. If the player opens the PlayStation's tray, removes the disc, and proceeds to close the tray back up, the game surprisingly continues to run. It's a bit weird though. Since the disc is no longer there, the console is unable to read new data. This prevents it from being able to load new objects into the world. OTG is especially useful when using the world map. When the player loads into the map, the game loads the area immediately around them, but doesn't load stuff further away. When the disc is removed, the stuff that had previously loaded remains that way, but stuff outside its radius no longer will. Players are then able to walk through any wall that was supposed to be loaded in, removing any barriers normally in place. This has the obvious benefit of being able to reach places that are normally inaccessible until later on in the story. The player simply needs to load into the map, remove the game, navigate to a desired location, and reinsert the disc. Once the console can read the data again, it'll load any objects in and proceed largely as normal. The current route uses the trick several times to various extents. One of the most important instances comes early in the run. After leaving the village of Engave, the player needs to eject the disc at a specific point in the map. By doing it here, a mountain has partially loaded in. Approaching the mountain from the unloaded half and entering the loaded part causes the player to be pushed up. They can then navigate the map at a higher elevation, allowing them to pick up additional items that are globally loaded upon entry. This OTG is especially useful as it allows the player to obtain the Vorpal Sword, an endgame weapon, within minutes of starting. The trick can also be used to skip large sections of the map. Dio Pass is a story required level. If the player doesn't go through it, the game won't progress. The way the developers check to see if the player went through the level is with cutscene triggers, with one being at the start of the level and the other being at the boss fight. By entering the level, the player can activate the first cutscene, then leave to the map again. Here they can remove the disc, navigate to the other side of Dio Pass, and reinsert the disc. This will allow them to activate the second trigger and progress having barely seen any of Dio Pass. Despite having clear utility, Open Tray Glitch is not without its flaws. Movement abilities unlocked further along in the story are much faster at navigating the map, leading to it only being used for around a third of the run. Another downside is the lag created after using it. This greatly increases the time it takes the game to load, reducing its viability to currently only 7 spots. As far as why the community allowed a normally controversial glitch, a lot of it came down to ease of isolation. The parameters of the trick were easy to define and notice, allowing for a clean category split. This gave players the option to run with the glitch if they wanted, but they were by no means obligated to do so. But what about glitches that go too far? Tricks that question the very fundamentals of speedrunning that communities have to ban them. GoldenEye is a James Bond title released on the N64 in 1997. Its inclusion of an in-game timer and the burgeoning age of the internet combined to GoldenEye founding one of the oldest and most vibrant communities in all of speedrunning. As one would expect from such a storied community, some of the game's history is a bit out there. Being on the N64, GoldenEye is built around one of gaming's more awkward controllers. While most games made players adjust to a specific layout, Rare opted to give players several choices. This went beyond just different button bindings though. The game even allows players to play with 2 controllers at the same time. In fact, 2 controllers actually has some advantages. Certain playstyles allow Bond to reach full speed faster. Although this saves only a fraction of a second, it can make a huge difference. The GoldenEye community still adheres to using the in-game timer as opposed to an external one. Since the in-game timer only shows full seconds, using 2 controllers can be the difference between saving a full second or nothing at all. While playing with 2 controllers isn't controversial, another controller-based exploit was. In fact, within hours of being disclosed, the trick would be unanimously banned. The story would begin on September 18th, 2012, when a player by the name of Trent would post brand new, untied world records on both the Secret Agent and 00 Agent of Train. This would come as a bit of a shock to the community. While Trent was certainly a talented player, ranking in the top 25 players in the world at the time, he rarely played at a world record level. More than this, the records he was beating were previously untied in their own right, held by one of the game's greatest players on one of his specialty stages. In short, the claims were monumental. To add to the intrigue, Trent would not upload a video for either of these records, but would post one for the agent difficulty of the stage, with his new personal best being 13 seconds off of world record. It had become apparent that Trent had discovered a new strategy and used it in his runs, but he refused to disclose it to the community. Instead, he told a few people close to him who would, in turn, provide testimonial to its legitimacy, further stoking outrage. This behavior would continue for several days, with more new records set by a privy few, while the masses were left to stew. It became apparent that in a community built around James Bond, the only option left was espionage. David Clemens, one of the game's all-time greats, would go undercover. At this time, players still used AOL Instant Messenger. Clemens would set up an account that mimicked the username styles of one of the people Trent shared the strategy with. He then proceeded to send vague statements to another person in the know. In time, Clemens convinced them to share a video of the trick with him. What was revealed was nothing less than shocking. For some objectives, a timer must play out before the game will say it's complete. While this normally is inconsequential, as the player just continues the level while this timer runs, for some levels, the player reaches the end of the level before the timer has expired. In these cases, Bond has to wait for the timer to run out before he can leave the level. Trent found a way to skip waiting for this timer, but the manner required was nothing short of absurd. The player has to begin by having a second controller plugged into the N64, but it needs to be dismantled, leaving the circuit board exposed. Runners would then play the level like normal until they reach the end. At this point, the player needs to press down on the exposed circuit board. This causes the game to mostly freeze. The player is no longer able to move, and the in-game timer stops counting up. Conveniently though, objective timers continue running. This functionality allows the player to skip the waiting required for these missions. This is especially useful on a level like Train. Here, the player needs to wait for Natalia to hack the computers, which takes a very long time. In fact, depending on the difficulty the runner is playing, pressing down on the circuit board could save nearly 45 seconds. When the strategy used was revealed, the outrage only grew. Long-time and highly respected runners stated their intentions to leave GoldenEye if the trick was allowed. The entire community came out in opposition to the glitch, leading to it being swiftly banned. While anything goes is a general principle speedrunners follow, exploits outside the scope of the game often fall into a gray area. Manipulating hardware with its potential to ruin an already limited supply of game materials has generally been taboo. Of course, video games aren't the only way people speedrun. When people think of chess, most aren't thinking of it as a speed-based event. Sure, there is a time management element and some variants are built around speed, but the most prestigious form of chess remains games that span several hours. That hasn't stopped people from finding unique ways to speedrun it though. The highest title conferred to chess players is the rank of Grandmaster. Even at the highest level, most people who play chess never become a Grandmaster. For those that do, it often takes decades of their life to obtain. This isn't the case for everyone though. Some people who take to chess at a young age showcase an exceptional ability to gain mastery of the board. Since the title's introduction in 1950, being the youngest to obtain the rank of Grandmaster has been a coveted claim. This has, in essence, encouraged people to speedrun chess Grandmastery, in hopes of reaching one of the game's highest honors faster than anyone before them. When chess's governing body FIDE first created the rank, they bestowed it to 27 of the most highly skilled players of the day, as well as talented players who were past their peak. Of these 27, the youngest of them was then 26-year-old David Bronstein of the Soviet Union. When he was made a Grandmaster, Bronstein was undergoing a meteoric rise in the world of chess. The next year, he would compete in the World Championship against reigning champion Mikhail Botnavic. Over the course of the 24 games, each would win 5, with 14 ending in a draw. The championship would close with the scores tied 12-12, allowing Botnavic to retain his title, and Bronstein would never again come this close. A year after losing the World Championship, 1952 would see Bronstein lose the claim of being the youngest to reach Grandmaster to fellow Soviet Tigran Petrosian, who achieved the rank at age 23. Where Bronstein failed, Petrosian would succeed, beating Botnavic to claim the title of World Champion in 1963. Prior to this though, Petrosian would see his claim to being the youngest Grandmaster to an 18-year-old Boris Spassky. Spassky and Petrosian would be recurring in each other's lives, with Spassky challenging Petrosian for the World Championship 2 cycles in a row, finally claiming the title in 1969. It wasn't until a 15-and-a-half-year-old Bobby Fischer became the youngest Grandmaster in 1958 that someone outside the Soviet Union would claim the title. Fischer would also end the Soviet Union's 35-year streak of having the chess world champion, following his defeat of Spassky in 1972. The entanglement between the World Championship and the youngest to reach Grandmaster would end with Fischer. Since that point, no world champion has ever been the youngest to reach Grandmaster. In fact, Fischer would remain the youngest for over 30 years. It wouldn't be until Judith Polgar, widely regarded as the greatest women's chess player ever, reached Grandmaster in 1991 at the age of 15 and 4 months that Fischer would lose his claim. There are few things as life-consuming as chasing a mastery of chess, but to achieve such great heights at such a young age requires total dedication. Judith Polgar exemplifies this better than anyone. Her father Laszlo believed that with early and intensive specialization in a particular subject, he could turn any healthy child into a prodigy, leading to him dedicating most of his daughter's schooling to chess and languages like Esperanto. The extent of this total dedication would be best exemplified in the summer of 1993. After breaking the UN's blockade of Yugoslavia, Bobby Fischer was living in seclusion in a small Yugoslavian village. The Polgar family would convince Bobby to come out of hiding, inviting the then 50-year-old complete stranger to come and live with them. Over the following 30 years, this time has been slowly whittled down. It's currently held by Abhimanyu Mishra, who achieved the feat at the age of 12 years, 4 months, and 25 days. Of course, being the youngest to become a Grandmaster is something you can only attempt once, meaning that if you want to keep speedrunning chess, you need to find a different approach. One such option is an ELO speedrun. The ELO rating system is a means of measuring skill in zero-sum competitions. Each player is given a value that is representative of a player's strength. Points are allocated upon the conclusion of a match, with the winning player gaining ELO and the losing player sees their rating decrease. The amount that these ratings change after the game is dependent on a number of factors, including the strength of the opponent, quality of win, and game result. If a higher rated player beats a lower rated player, they would gain fewer points than if they won against someone whose ELO was higher than theirs. Conversely, losing to a player with higher ELO results in losing fewer points than if the player had a lower rating. While many creators have made series on trying to reach high ELOs in as few games as possible, chess streamer Anna Kramley would adopt an approach most similar to traditional speedruns. Her goal was to see how long it would take her to reach an ELO rating of 2000 on a brand new account. To contextualize this, the rating for a Grandmaster is usually regarded as being 2500, and Anna has a peak classical rating of 2175. Rather than playing classical chess though, Anna opted to play blitz chess for her run. Blitz is a faster variant of chess where players have less time to make moves, forcing them to play quicker and rely on in-the-moment thinking as opposed to slow analysis. Upon the creation of an account for chess.com, the website has the player play 5 games before providing them with an ELO rating. After winning her first 5 matches, chess.com would rate her account at 993 ELO, putting her just under halfway done. While this would pace her to be at 2000 in less than a dozen games, this isn't how the speedrun works. As a player's ELO increases, the games get harder on account of the players being more skilled. Additionally, less ELO is exchanged, leading to more games needing to be played to go up the same number of points. While her first 5 games were worth nearly 200 ELO each, the next 5 games would see Anna only climb 185 ELO for a total of 1178. 10 matches later, and the account's rating was up to 1383. Up to this point, the speedrun has been pretty steady, but Anna's first loss would come in match 22, costing her 18 ELO and bringing her from 1399 to 1381. She would quickly recover from this though, closing out game 50 with a rating of 1674 and only 2 losses so far. For the rest of the run, wins were worth generally around 8 ELO each, meaning that if everything went well, over 12 games needed to be played to go up 100 rating. Despite a few hiccups, the speedrun had largely been smooth sailing up to the 1700s. But this is where things got a little rocky. Between matches 61 through 70, Anna would split the set, winning half of them and losing the rest. While this resulted in a net gain, she only gained 15 ELO over a 48-minute span. She would steady the run though, going over 20 matches without a loss and increasing from 1740 to 1903. During this span, she'd have her first 2 draws of the game. A draw occurs when a player has no legal moves but is not in check, positional repetition, or if both players agree to draw. While draws are a largely neutral result, since Anna's profile had a lower rating than her opponents, she gained 1 ELO from each of these matches. The last 100 ELO would take 21 games, with Anna winning 16, losing 4, and drawing 1. Upon finishing her last game, the run would end with a time of 8 hours, 20 minutes, and 2 seconds. While this was certainly an impressive speedrun, it can still be pushed further. The most evident area for improvement is cleaning up the losses. Over the course of Anna's run, she'd win 96 games while losing 13 and drawing 3. Since a loss generally costs the same as a win, it in essence means playing 2 games to make no progress. Cutting out the losses and draws could potentially bring the game total down from 112 to around 83 games. Additionally, spending less time in each game can save a significant amount of time, but this is also dependent on each opponent playing fast. It only half matters how efficiently you move your pieces, as an opponent could run out their clock whenever they wish. While speedrunning chess may run counter to the game's nature, it still requires playing the game largely as anyone else does. With video games, this isn't the case. For every game, the holy grail is the discovery of arbitrary code execution, or ACE. ACE requires a unique blend of creative ingenuity and knowledge to discover. Countless pieces need to fall into place for a game to have ACE that's only possible in a select few. One such game is Paper Mario on the N64. In Paper Mario, the game can only hold 96 particle effects in memory. Any more effects and the game will crash. Prior to reaching 96 though, the game will begin to execute code that was written. Players would discover a way to manipulate the code that was written, allowing them to make the game send Mario to the end credits and finish the run. The journey to this point though was one of the strangest in speedrunning history. For a while, the community was aware of the ability to write and execute code, but were unable to finish the puzzle at first. The amount of code they could write was severely limited, with half of the values being located in the N64 expansion pack. At first this seemed useless, as Paper Mario didn't even use the expansion pack, but it would actually prove groundbreaking. When the N64 is turned off, it doesn't always clear RAM immediately. Instead, there's a small window where the player is able to switch cartridges and transfer RAM from one game to another. This opened up the possibility for a player to perform ACE in one game to write data to the expansion pack, switch cartridges, then execute the command in Paper Mario. As is often the case in speedrunning, Ocarina of Time would have the answer. Since OOT cleared RAM on console boot up instead of shutdown, and since it had ACE, it opened up the possibility to beat Paper Mario. After extensive testing, a route was set up in OOT which would write a jump instruction that would be stored in RAM. This jump instruction could then be executed in Paper Mario through the use of particle storage. By forcing the game to crash and then rebooting it, the player could then select the file, taking them to the credit screen. Even now, with an ACE credit warp possible solely in Paper Mario, the fastest way to beat the game still uses OOT. This was by all means one of the craziest discoveries in all of speedrunning. Perhaps more than any other trick, the original method of performing ACE in Paper Mario pushed the definition of what it means to beat a game. But while Paper Mario may provoke questions of what it means to beat a game, there's another speedrun that raises the question of what it means to learn a language. Duolingo is a language learning app that takes a more game-based approach to learning. It's also modeled around users playing for a short period each day, with an emphasis being placed on playing every day. This has led to hundreds of millions of people trying out the program. Speedrunners, of course, are time-efficient people though. While Duolingo is built around playing 5 or 10 minutes a day, the amount of learning that can be achieved in this time varies vastly depending on the speed at which you answer questions. There are two main approaches to Duolingo speedruns, and they boil down to the question of whether or not you know the language. When the runner knows the language they're speedrunning, the goal is very straightforward. They simply need to complete the games as quickly as possible. An early example of Duolingo speedruns where the runner knows the language is Easy Speezy's Spanish run from 2021. In this run, Easy attempted to finish the first unit of Spanish as quickly as possible. Since he has a familiarity with Spanish, he could quickly skip through any lesson portion of the run and instead focus on completing the activities. One of the most common activities in the speedrun is sentence construction. Duolingo provides the runner with a sentence in English, and with the help of a word bank, they must reconstruct the sentence in the desired language. Since Easy knows he can translate the sentence, the activity is mostly about recognizing where the words are and selecting them as quickly as possible. As you progress through the lesson, Duolingo incorporates new mechanics the runner must complete. This can be as easy as selecting a picture that corresponds with the word, or reading a sentence so Duolingo can check your pronunciation. As you near the end of the section, the difficulty continues to ramp. Instead of being given a word bank to choose from, the runner needs to type the response, introducing spelling mistakes as a possible time loss. Easy Speezy would complete his run with a time of 31:31. Due to the fast-paced nature of Duolingo, completing a speedrun of a language you know is a very rapid challenge. The game provides minimal downtime as it quickly transitions from one exercise to the next. A single lesson of Duolingo is designed to take around 2 minutes. Since the first module of Spanish consisted of around 36 units, Easy Speasy completed his run in under half the expected time. Of course, he was working with a language he knew. Things change wildly when you don't know the language. Take the sentence construction sections as an example. Someone who knows the language just needs to translate between them. This isn't an option when encountering a new language though. Instead, the runner needs to use the educational functions of Duolingo. When you hover over a word, it'll provide the runner with translation options. The runner then needs to select the correct option from the words provided in the bank. As the player progresses through a lesson, they can begin to recognize words they previously looked up. This ability to recall newly acquired information is one of the primary ways to save time in these runs. After all, while it's impossible to know something you've never encountered before, you can only use that excuse the first time. While speedrunning one language sounds hard, imagine learning them all. This is the exact goal that JCCBM or John set out to achieve. Beginning in the summer of 2021 with Russian, the next 2 years would see John working his way through the languages offered by Duolingo. As one would expect, the journey started out slow. John would start with Russian, and while John is fluent in English and Spanish, neither of these languages has much transferability to Russian. Over time though, certain languages would start to go smoother. While it's easy to think of language in a box, it couldn't be much further from the truth. Most languages exist in what's known as a language family. Language families function similarly to a family tree, with different branches and degrees of separation. When languages are closely related, there's often a high degree of mutual intelligibility. A primary example of this is Galician and Portuguese. Both languages are descended from a language spoken in the Middle Ages known as Galician Portuguese. Political change in the region would lead to a split in the language, resulting in Portuguese and Galician being distinct languages today. Despite this though, the languages are highly mutually intelligible, with it being estimated that a speaker of one can understand around 85% of what someone speaking the other says. Even for less closely related languages, common ancestors can still leave similarities that provide clues to what a word means. As John speedran more languages, he would gain a deeper understanding of different language families. When he had a greater degree of familiarity with the family, this provided John with a better starting position, allowing him to finish the language more quickly than if he had been going in with no background at all. At the time of writing, the last language John has left to complete is Hebrew. Up to this point, John has completed 36 languages, 1,637 lessons, and over 20,000 exercises. Once this is complete, he will have speedrun every language Duolingo has to offer, until they add more. One language Duolingo is considering adding is music. Music is considered a universal language. Every society develops it and appreciates it. Although taste varies person to person and era to era, there are certain universal constants, almost like people, regardless of preference, can recognize when a song is truly great. Crank That Soulja Boy is a novelty hip-hop song released in 2007 by American rapper Soulja Boy. The song would prove to be an unlikely success, as it was one of the first songs to successfully utilize social media to gain virality. It would make its way to number 1 on the Hot 100, as well as the 23rd most successful song of the 2000s and the 151st most popular in Billboard history. As the story goes, Soulja Boy wrote and recorded the song in 10 minutes. A total of 10 minutes was all it took to create a career-establishing song that is still talked about. Now, 10 minutes is a pretty short time, but if you know speedrunners, there's always room for improvement. For one reason or another, many people are interested in speedrunning but don't start because of the notion that they'll never be good enough. All it takes is something to be passionate enough to learn and dedicated enough to continue. The history of Crank That speedrunning began in March of 2021 by a Dutch runner named Wouw Namloos. The run entails recreating the first 45 seconds of music in the song. How long Namloos had been grinding or if he had gotten the world record before this is a mystery. All that's known is that one day out of nowhere, Soulja Boy's Crank That world record had been annihilated, with the time now standing at 2:55. Watching through the video, it's clear Namloos is passionate about the run. Near the end, you can see in his eyes that he knows what pace he's on. When the run is over, he's unable to control himself, busting out into the Crank That dance before collapsing in exhaustion. For a while, this is where the record would stand. It wasn't until February of 2022, nearly a year after Wouw Namloos' run, that the YouTuber Servada Music, or Simon, would challenge the record. Simon is a music production YouTuber who makes a mix of educational and vlog-style content. By 2022 though, Simon had gotten into watching speedrunning content. The combination of his interests naturally led to him looking for music production speedruns. Expecting to find nothing, he would come across Namlu's 255 and knew he had to try. He started off slow, with his first run of 10:32 not even beating Soulja Boy's run from all the way back in 2007. It's not about how you start though. Simon was a quick learner. He began to implement shortcut keys, allowing him to efficiently navigate FL Studio using the keyboard, rather than cumbersome clicking with the mouse. By the end of his third day, Simon had brought the time down to an astonishing 37.39. In another world, this time stood forever, but Simon made a fatal error. At the end of his video, he asked for people not to beat his run.
If you guys think you can beat this, please don't, because it took me really long to do this.
Naturally, no one listened. A cascade of runs would flood in, with the time pushed further and further down before reaching a 22.74, set by fellow music production YouTuber Eliminate. Now, when I started working on this video, that's where the story ended. Eliminate's record had stood for months and the hype had settled down. Little did I expect the return of the king. The initial results were less than ideal. Eliminate was simply faster at every stage of the run, and time was running out for Simon to catch up. Needing a breakthrough, Simon went into the lab, believing that something had to be overlooked. Miraculously, he would find his saving grace. There, hidden deep away in the Legacies folder, was the exact piano sample he needed. This significantly cut down the time needed to construct the piano section, providing Simon with an opening. He would also reevaluate his own practices, finding inefficiencies and cutting them out. With these optimizations, Simon would make fast work of Eliminate's time, achieving a 22.41 and reclaiming the throne. Simon wasn't satisfied yet though. He had his eyes on a bigger prize, the first sub 20. 2 PBs later, on the 5th day of his grind, Simon would achieve a 19.91.
Tell me I got it. No way.
What had taken Soulja Boy a whole 10 minutes back in 2007 was now a 30th as long. Crank That Speedrunning took the pinnacle of a man's career and made it nearly as fast as scrolling down, liking the video, and hitting the subscribe button. Now, thank you for watching and see you next time.